that has specific points that you keep coming back to, and then there are stories that may seem to be totally unrelated to it, but a story that a villain is after, in one part of the game, you may suddenly find that the hero is involved with it weeks later, because it all connects, and somehow a lot of these characters are connected in various fashions. So the stories work together, and yet there's also individual missions. So you can tell stories that are more typical of the DCU, good crime stories, good attack stories, good villain stories. And the interesting thing is when you're a villain, you win, you know, which was, at least for me, one of the hardest things to get my mindset around, is to remember that a villain could win as well. So you're having hero stories and villain stories, and you're having the entire DCU type of material being reflected every single mission.
You know, but how awesome would it be if you chose to be a villain and every time Superman just shows up and you lose every mission? it's like, oh.
So, but it's
$15 a month. It's horrible.
It takes a little bit. We're all trained to have it the other way, and it became so much fun to start coming up with villain missions where the hero loses. You know, sometimes the hero will win, and the villain will not get away with it. They may get away, they may not get away. They may get thrown in prison, they may not. They may have to be someone may have to free them later. This all works together. That's the beauty. A mission that starts in point A may have different points down the line that you'll reconnect with that same thing. So a device that's stolen and caught, you know, in the first mission will come back later on, and you really get that feeling of the DCU because we're a serialized type of comics. We keep coming back to same things, but then we grow them, and that's how the game works. So it really works with the DCU.
It's really tricky to develop for that too, because you really have to commit early. You can't say, hey, we're going to do heroes now, and then we're going to do villains later, because actually having both and having those stories kind of weave between the two sides is really important in how you design the game from the ground up. So it's very important to us right from the onset that this wasn't just a hero game, it's a hero and a villain.
But it's also, I think it's cool to be able to team up with Superman, then you team up with Sinestro.
Yes.
Yeah. That's just awesome. Because Sinestro rocks.
He does.
He does now.
Yeah, that's right. And also, let's shift gears a little bit. And speaking of the design of the game, from an artistic standpoint, comic books, unless you're drunk when you're reading them, and admittedly I am often, they're a two-dimensional medium, but you guys, Jim and then Wes, I know as a producer, you guys have created this three-dimensional universe based around what is essentially a two-dimensional universe. So how challenging was it to design that, and how, on Jim's end, and how challenging was it to implement in the game?
Draw the backside of buildings was really a lot of work. It's like, oh my gosh, what does a building look like on the other side? That was tricky, but we figured that one out early. And no, you know, it's a challenge. I mean, when we draw in 2D, when you do a comic book story, you don't really have to keep the figures looking consistent from page to page, panel to panel. If you want Batman to look more fierce and scary, you can just draw him bigger on the page. And if you want him to look like he's been defeated, you make him look kind of scrawny and shriveled. And some people do this differently from panel to panel, like where his fists will get huge or whatever if he's about to punch somebody. And in the game, you really don't have that. It has to be consistent. So we had to really figure out how long is his cape, you know. And in the comics, you know, sometimes it goes on and on. And so there's just those kind of questions, but just like even more subtle things, like what is the texture of these costumes? I mean, I never really think about any of that stuff. It's always shiny blue or shiny black, you know. And now they're like, oh, we could put leather in there. Like leather? Wow, I never thought about it. But wouldn't that be heavy and smelly? I mean, you know. So these are like questions I had to deal with, but we figured it out.
And then what's in implementing that?
Yeah,
how did that work?
On the implementing side, I mean, it was really a challenge to just kind of get the pipeline, because we really wanted to match the look and feel of the comics and of all the concepts that Jim and the guys at Wildstorm built. So it was an iterative process of getting kind of like the initial concepts, then working on the high-res models, and then passing them back to Jim, who, you know, have some comments on that, and then generating kind of a game res model. And each step of the way, there was a lot of kind of checks and to make sure that we're hitting the mark there. The other part is just kind of putting the entire world together. There's not kind of this kind of guide to Metropolis
amazing how much stuff actually wasn't created. I mean, for 70 years of continuity, there is no street level map in Metropolis. So we had to generate that, and then that would be bounced over to the design guys, and they said, well, it would be better for this neighborhood, we're next to this neighborhood. And so we essentially moved huge chunks of concrete just to make the game better. Just like all around. And so just all sorts of little things like that.
And then speaking of some of the specific areas, as you guys can see from these slides up here, there are a lot of things in the universe that have been around forever, specifically Star Labs, that have been explored in the comic books, but you guys are really giving it life here. You're allowing people to walk through it and things like that. So Marv, we'll start with you. What was it like fleshing out what Star Labs actually is in a three-dimensional space?
Well, the amazing thing is I was down in Austin a few weeks ago looking at Star Labs and realizing how huge this place actually is. Because generally, when we're writing the comics, we just think about the one room we need to be in, you know, whether it's a lab or it's you know, some generator room that's going to explode or whatever else like this. But this is a huge environment with endless number of rooms, and you start to realize, oh my God, I can put a story right there and lead over there and lead over there and move over there and then go outside and come back, because this is a larger environment than I ever expected and larger than I've ever seen in the comics. Because as I said, we always tend to center on one area we need to. Now we have the freedom to move all over the place.
And then Jim, we were speaking earlier outside, and you said one of the challenges for you was making sure that it didn't look like the Watchtower.
Right. Yeah, I think whenever you're doing interiors, it's sort of based on technology, and you have that steel kind of look, you want to make sure that everything looks and feels differently. You know, we try to do that with everything. I mean, if you're at a street corner in Gotham, you know, I want you to know instantly from looking just down that one street that you're in Gotham City. And same for Metropolis. So we really try to make things that look as iconic as possible and really have points of interest throughout, not just the city, but even interiors like Star Labs. So every room has some like cool thing in it. So it just keeps it interesting, and also helps you keep your bearings as you kind of run through this massive environment.
So basically, Jim's promising that the test tubes in the Watchtower are not going to look like the test tubes in Star Labs. You heard it here first. You can Twitter that right now. And Jens, I want to talk about the actual functionality of places like Star Labs within this universe. Is Star Labs going to be kind of a mission home base? How's it going to operate in the universe?
Well, we have a lot of areas in the game which are sort of these high-end, what we call instances, or basically like, you know, kind of like in fantasy models, it'd be dungeons or something that you can go into and have these extended adventures with a bunch of your friends. The cool part about, I think, places like Star Labs and other areas in the game is that one thing I love about DC is that these environments themselves are kind of characters, right? It's a really cool thing that DC has. Gotham City is kind of a character in itself, so is Metropolis. So we kind of took that philosophy and transplanted it into places like Star Labs. So what's Star Labs all about for us? Well, we had this concept of kind of like, oops, did I do that? You know, it's these guys who are kind of like experimenting with technology and machinery that kind of goes wrong all the time, and it's for the greater good. Oops. So, you know, we kind of like set that up as our story and the places that, or the type of things you can do when you go to Star Labs. It's really kind of like cleaning up these gigantic disasters that kind of happen there as a result of scientists poking into areas where you really shouldn't be.
Great. And I'm going to open this up. One last question before I open it up to you guys. Besides the fact that you have these three massive talents involved, I love you, Jeff. Wes, on the surface, this game looks a lot like a City of Heroes or like a Champions Online. Obviously, you guys are going to draw those comparisons. What sets this game apart from games like that?
Yeah, well, the big thing is there's the visceral action element. I mean, we have a demo game in our booth down at the end of G something, but at the end of the convention hall, and really, I mean, to properly describe that, you have